Hi, this is Caroline from The Happy Sensitive, and I'm here with a video on how to create quiet time in your life without becoming a total hermit. I actually got this as a question from someone recently, and she just put it so well. She said, I feel like I'm having to learn all over again how to find the right balance between retreat and activity, between time alone and time with people. And what interests me is creating quiet space in my life without becoming a total hermit, right? Because obviously, if you become a total hermit, you have lots of quiet time. And it seems like in advice for highly sensitive people, this is often the direction that a lot of this goes in. And for some highly sensitive people who are more introverted, they might be totally fine with just having tons of quiet time. And they're like, ideally, I would have endless amounts of quiet time. That's my preferred lifestyle. And if so, then you don't have this dilemma. You don't have this dilemma of, I want to have some quiet time, but not too much. Now, I am not that kind of HSP. I'm not the kind of HSP who wants endless amounts of quiet time. I want some quiet, but I also want to have fun adventures. I want to do things. I want to meet people. I want to do things that are intense, right? That require a lot from me, that are sometimes exhausting, that can be hard. And so I need to have that balance between that quiet time that I need to recharge and that excitement and that stimulation that I need to also feel alive and feel excited about things. So in this video, I want to give you 3 tips to create more quiet time in your life. Now, before I give you these tips, I want to give you a quick background where this is coming from. So back in 2009, I was really, really sick. I had fibromyalgia, adrenal fatigue. I could barely do anything. I was constantly overwhelmed, a near panic attack. Life was really, really hard, and there was no clear explanation about what I was going through. There was no clear solution. I was kind of stuck. And I had to figure out, how do I build up my energy from zero? Because I was in a situation where I could not go back to work. I had to stay at home. People told me, just rest. But if you've been resting for 3 weeks and nothing has changed, at some point you get very, very bored, right? It's hard to just rest when you want to go do things. So even though I was first confronted with this problem in 2009 when I was very sick, it's not a problem that went away. It's the intensity of it that went away. But this core problem of, I want to do more things than I can physically handle, is something that I think a lot of us have. Where it's like, I want to do all these things, but my body won't let me because I crash, or I get panic attacks, or I get completely overwhelmed, or I lose all my mojo, and I think I've done too much, but I can't really understand how or why it was too much. Like somehow I missed the memo on what I'm supposed to be doing. Right? Well, that's definitely how I felt. It took me 3 years to get my energy back up to like a minimal level where I could work part-time. 3 years is a very, very long time. But what I learned in that period was that first of all, I learned a few things. One of the things I learned is that when things are really, really bad, when you're in a really bad place, it's not that you're different than you normally are. It's just that all those things that normally affect you as well now affect you in a bigger way. So when you're highly sensitive and you're super stressed, you're going to notice that certain things get to you more than other times when you're feeling okay. Now, that doesn't mean that those things that stress you out when you're feeling bad are normally not a big deal at all. It just means when you're feeling well, you have more energy to handle it, right? So what this means is that when we're not feeling well, and this is the first tip, you were like, when is this first tip coming? This is the first tip. When you're not feeling well, this is giving you clues about what you're sensitive to. And you would do well to take that information into your life when you're feeling better and to take it into account. So if you notice when you're feeling exhausted, tired, not well, that really, really loud noises really get to you, but normally not so much, and normally you think you can handle it, and normally you think you're fine, that means that loud noises are a big stressor for you, and that even when you're feeling better, you can handle them. You have to limit how much you expose yourself to loud noises. I'm not saying you always have control. I'm not saying you should avoid them 100%. I'm just saying If somebody says, hey, let's go for a drink, and you're trying to choose between two bars and one of them has really loud music and the other one's really quiet, pick the quiet one. Even if you think, oh, but I can handle it, I'm fine, that one's cooler, take the quieter one, because you have learned from experience that loud, super loud music exhausts you. And just because you don't notice it now, it doesn't mean it's not happening. Okay, so that's the first tip. When you're not feeling well, you're depleted, exhausted, if you're sick for a longer period of time, that's when you're really getting clued in on what are the things that upset and exhaust you the most. Take that information on board. Don't throw it away when you feel better. Okay. Second tip. Just because something works for someone else doesn't mean it's going to work for you. That's annoying, isn't it? But what makes you calm down, what makes you feel excited is very personal. That's a good thing, right? Like, we're all unique individuals. Everyone on this planet is different. We have similarities. We share common themes. We share common ways of doing things. There are things that work for a lot of people, but the combination of specific things that exactly works for you is unique. So that means when you're trying to figure out how to calm down, or you're trying to figure out how to get your mojo back, what exact things you need to do for you can be different than, what works for your friend. So if you're downloading lists on like, these are the top things you have to do to calm down and to feel better, and they're not working, throw them away. Don't stress out about, oh, but this should be working for me. Why is it not working? What's wrong with me? Because a lot of these tips and tricks, they miss the crucial point, which is that your stress responses, your nervous system is pretty complicated, and you have a whole bunch of different reactions depending on where you're at, depending on how tired you are, depending on what happened before. So it's not like you're stressed or not stressed. No, you have different levels of stress. And for one level of stress, maybe that tip from some internet page works really well. And maybe for other levels of stress, it doesn't work at all. But you think, oh, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. That doesn't make any sense. But it's because your body is in all these different stress states at different points in time, and not every single thing is going to work for every single stress state that you might be in, right? I'm kind of glossing over this here because this is a big piece that I will tell you more about how to find out more about this at the end of the video. Okay, third tip. I forgot what it was. I had it just a minute ago. Oh yes, third tip, sit down. You're like, I'm sitting right now. Okay, so let me explain. Sit down. One thing I learned from when I was really overwhelmed and tired and exhausted and depleted in 2009 was that there were times where if I did not sit down, I would literally keel over. There have been times where I was seen to be sitting in the city center because I had, gotten on my little bicycle, gone to town to get groceries, and then my energy ran out. I could not move another inch. I had to find a place to sit. And sometimes it got really bad and I felt really nauseous and just dizzy. And there's been a few times where I sat with my head between my legs. And people looked at me sometimes in disgust. I think they assumed that I was a young girl who drank too much. Very far from the truth, but hey, people don't know. So I learned the very hard way that sometimes you have to sit down. Now, I took my own advice from tip 1, and I took this with me even when I started to feel better. Because I realized a lot of things we do when we feel a little bit like in a slump, and we're not excited about something, and you've been active for a while. I should point that out first. It's not like you've been just hanging around at home doing nothing. No, you've been active, you've been doing something for a while, maybe for an hour, maybe 2 hours, maybe 3 hours, and then you start to lose your mojo. You don't feel motivated, you don't feel excited, you feel grumpy, you're fed up, you're getting a little panicky. Well, chances are what you're going to do in those moments is to try to get over it and push yourself and encourage yourself. Maybe you grab some chocolate, maybe you grab an energy drink, maybe you convince yourself to keep going. But a lot of those times, like when you start to feel a little bit blah, that's your body saying, take a moment to just sit down. Just sit. Sit down, stare out the window, or sit down outside and just wait. Give your system time to wait. Now, when I had to do this, when I was super sick, I had to wait for like half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour, sometimes 1.5 hours. There were times I was just sitting somewhere for 1.5 hours before I could keep going again. That's how long it took. And I was like, all right, we're just waiting for the battery to recharge because I am completely flat and I cannot go anywhere right now. It sucked, but that's something I had to learn. And thankfully, I don't have to do that anymore. I don't have to wait 1.5 hours when I'm tired before I can keep going again. But I have learned to notice when I feel that urge to like, oh, there's something wrong. I'm not as excited anymore. And I've learned to not push myself, not grab an energy drink, not try to make myself, but instead sit down. And the sitting down doesn't have to be long. Right now, it's more like maybe 5-10 minutes, but just giving your system a chance to reboot, giving everything a chance to settle. So that means not sitting down and like reading, right? It means sitting down and just staring a little bit. And if you're like, oh, I'm at work, I can't do that, get yourself something to drink. Maybe walk to the photocopier or make some copies. Do something really dumb, something really simple where you can just kind of numb out and you don't really have to pay attention. You can just kind of stare into space, right? Just do that. Whatever it is that you need to do to cover up the fact that you just need to stare into space for 10 minutes now. You'll notice when you do that, your body gets back online. Your enthusiasm gets back online. Everything gets back online. But if you keep pushing, you get more and more frustrated and depleted and meh. Okay. So I mentioned that our nervous system is complicated. It's not that you're just stressed or not stressed, right? What actually happens is that when we're happy, we're in this perfect, well, not perfect, but we're in this great little middle zone. There's not too much stimulation. There's not too little stimulation. There's just the right amount of activity. And you may have a bigger or smaller container for that. It might be very, when things are tough and you're struggling, it might be really close to the bone. Like what is too much and what is not enough might be a really, really thin line. But then when you're feeling better and you're healthier, you've got a bit more space. But either way, you need to stay within that box, that happy box. Now, the happy box doesn't mean that you are always excited and enthusiastic and wee about life, but it means you're keeping your stimulation levels in this place where it's not too much and it's not too little. And that's really important. Why? Because your nervous system is actually way more in control of how you feel than we think in our head. We think in our head, I can make myself feel better, I can be positive, I can be upbeat, I can try harder. But the reality is, as a highly sensitive person, when you're overstimulated or understimulated, your nervous system is like, I'm not happy. And you can try to think your way out of it and you can try to do all these things, but if you're not in that happy box of stimulation, then everything else is kind of a waste of time. So what I found is that is the most important thing to get on track first. Before you worry about everything else, worry about getting into that right stimulation box. Now, I wish I could just say, you just do this 3-minute meditation and everything will be fine, but this is actually quite complicated to figure out. Because you are unique, because you're not exactly the same as someone else. So your own happiness box is something that needs to be built from the inside out. It needs to be built on really getting to know yourself, your own signals, your own emotions, what they mean, what they're trying to tell you about your stimulation and your stress levels. Back when I learned about this, I was in my adrenal fatigue phase, and it took me about 3 years to really figure this out. You might think, 3 years, not a long time. Not a long time, maybe, but that was 3 years where I didn't work. I had all day to focus on this, okay? 3 years. It's a long time. So if you're like, holy crap, I don't want to spend 3 years living as a hermit to figure out this balance, because hopefully you have a full life. You have a job, you have friends, you have things you're excited about. You don't want to clear your slate for the next 3 years and figure out where do I find my happy balance, right? That's ridiculous. But I think that is why I went through it, so that I can teach you. I went through that for 3 years. I learned how to apply this to myself. I learned to really understand this very deeply, and I can now teach this to others. But I teach it one-on-one. It's not a prefab, downloadable program, because we need to work together and really get into the nitty-gritty of what your feelings mean, what your experiences mean, what is happening, what is your body trying to tell you about your limits and about your happy box, so that you start to understand, oh, now I'm outside of my happy box. Oh, now I'm inside of my happy box. And when I'm outside of my happy box, that you learn how to get back into your happy box. Because depending on what and how you're stressed, different strategies are going to work. So what I do with clients, and this is this program that I have is called the Happy Sensitive Foundations Program. What I do with clients is we work out what their stress response looks like. Because again, it's very unique. How do you recognize when you're stressed and what the stages are? Because a lot of people will say, I know when I'm stressed. Yeah, you know when you're on fire and you're about to throw yourself off the building, stressed, okay? That is different from noticing when you're a little bit stressed. Because when you're a little bit stressed, you have a lot more power. When you notice that and you know what to do to bring yourself back into that happy zone, life gets way easier. But what happens to most of us is we're inside of our happy zone. We don't know how or why we're there. And then something happens and we end up super stressed. We're way outside of our happy zone. And then somehow maybe we find our way back to the happy zone, but we don't understand how. We know that sometimes we manage to feel good and, figure out what we need. But a lot of times it's just kind of hit or miss, right? And then what happens is you cannot predict how you'll feel. You cannot predict what you can handle. You cannot predict what will be too much for you. So it makes you insecure. You're like, oh my God, I'm highly sensitive and I can't do all these things I want to do because I never know how I'm going to respond and I never know what I can handle, right? This is why having your own system, your own self-care system, your own stress system, like understanding that is super helpful. Because your body is constantly giving you feedback, is constantly trying to tell you, you're here and now you're here and now you're here. But if you don't understand what your body's trying to tell you, it feels like you're just lost somewhere. It's like your Google Maps got turned off and you have no idea where you're at. You have no idea how to get back. You're like, I guess there must be a way to get back home, but I don't know how. So you end up walking in circles, or you go in the wrong direction, and then it takes really long, and then you find your way back to your home at some point, and then you're like, okay, goof, I made it. But the goal is that your Google Maps is always on. So you're feeling overwhelmed, you're not feeling great, you're like, wait, let me check my Google Maps. Where am I now? I'm here, okay. So the quickest way back to my balanced, happier self is if I do this, right? And that doesn't mean you're gonna be home right away. If you're 4 hours from home, it's gonna take some time to get home, right? It's not magic. You can't just fly home in 3 seconds. So it's the same with your stress. If you're super stressed, I'm not promising that you use my special tip and you'll be feeling better in like 1 minute. No. Sometimes it takes a while. Sometimes we have to accept, I'm so freaked out that I am going to do the things that make me feel better, but I'm still gonna feel shitty today and tomorrow. But then by the day after tomorrow, I know that I'll feel better because I can track where I'm at and I know I need to go through these stages and then I feel better, right? But you know the right direction to go in. Okay, so I believe this is super important for highly sensitive people. Not for the highly sensitive people who just wanna super introvert and just hide away from the world, they're fine. But for the highly sensitive people who wanna go and do things and who get frustrated because they feel like they're being held back by their sensitivity. If that is you, if this resonates, if you think, yeah, that kind of sounds like me, go to the program page, Happy Sensitive Foundations, take a look. There's also a free email series you can sign up for. You can, if you're like, I'm not sure about this program, you can set up a clarity call with me first and talk to me. There's lots of little steps you can take, but just take a look, because for me, this made a huge difference in my life, understanding this. So now looking back on all that shit I went through, because I went through a lot of shit, I got a lot out of it. And I really had to squeeze every single lemon myself, to make the lemonade. But now, the way that I understand how my nervous system works and how my stress responses work means I can take on so much more than I could before. And I don't mean that I'm overloading myself, but it means I'm more confident about what I can do and what I can't do than I was before. because I know, oh, you know what? I can do that, but I just have to figure out how to manage it best. So let me just think about how I'm going to organize that so that I don't get overwhelmed and I'm going to do it feeling good, right? Because what's the point of running around and achieving things if you feel shitty and stressed and anxious all the time? I think that's just a waste. So this is a super helpful thing to understand about yourself, and you really, really get this, and not just like the idea, but the nitty gritty practical steps when you really get this for yourself. And the way I teach this, it's not something where you have to talk to me the rest of your life to keep this up to date, because, you know, your solutions, like your specific little techniques that you like and that you don't like, those will change, right? That will change. Like, you have to kind of regain your balance sometimes. But what I teach you is how to understand how the balancing act works. So how to understand from the inside out, okay, this is what my body is telling me. And then if you find, for example, that, I don't know, just something very basic, that you have a certain yoga routine that you always use for calming yourself down. And like, that's always my go-to when I feel a certain kind of frazzled. I use that yoga routine and it works great. Then one day you get fed up with the routine, like really fed up. You just don't want to do it anymore. You're like, I'm done with this routine. Well, then if you don't understand where that routine fits in your system, then you're stuck, right? You're like, suddenly you're like at a loss. You're like, what do I do now? But if you understand, this is a function it played in my self-care system, this is why it was helpful, then you can just swap it out for something else. You might have to search a little bit, you might have to try some things, but you know what you're looking for. So that's what I'm going to teach you. And so what it means is that when you understand the system, this is something you take with you for life. You can keep updating it no matter how your life changes, because you understand how your sensitive self and your sensitive nervous system really work. All right, this is Caroline from The Happy Sensitive. Thanks so much for listening. Bye.